Thanks everybody for joining us for today's informational webinar on an upcoming EdgeMarket RFP that Edge is planning to release, focused on the higher education software ecosystem. Really excited to bring the vendor community together today. Excited by the interest in this RFP, and we think we have lots of interesting insights and guidance and a really cool roadmap to share for the way we think this can transform software procurement in higher ed. So with that, we can jump right into it. And I'm Adam Scarzafava, AVP for Edge Events and Digital Marketing here at Edge. With me today, we have Walter Lewis, Edge's procurement agent, as well as Dan Miller, AVP for EdgeMarket and Solution Strategy. I'll let these guys introduce themselves as we get into the content, because they really bring so much to the table in making sure that Edge procurements are tuned for value to both our members and the vendor community. I will do just a quick introduction of Edge for those who may not be as familiar with us or might be joining us for the first time. We're a nonprofit, member-based research and education network and a technology consortium. So we are owned and operated technically. We were formed by the New Jersey President's Council for Higher Education. So we like to say that we're of, by, and for the higher ed community. We've grown to serve a wider swath of the public sector, including K-12, municipal and state governments, as well as other healthcare and other nonprofits. But the core of our mission, the really at the heart of everything that we do, is the higher education community and our history there. Hence the focus of this RFP on the higher ed software ecosystem. So what does Edge do? We're a networking and services provider, first and foremost. That's kind of the heritage and what we bring to the table. We've owned and operated a network that many of the institutions in New Jersey, and now increasingly Pennsylvania and New York as well, are joining to get access to the internet and get access to the cloud to leverage, maybe all your SaaS-based services that are living out there. We also deliver a number of services ourselves to fill in gaps for our members where they have challenges and we have expertise. Areas like virtual chief information security officer services, grants writing support, instructional design support as we get into digital learning and all the upheaval that's happening there with AI and accessibility and all kinds of things. We have folks on staff and we can support those efforts for our members, but we are still, that small but mighty nonprofit, and we can't be everything to everyone. So that's where the procurement side of things comes in. And that's where our connections with the vendor community come in. We'll obviously go into a lot more detail there, and that's really the focus of today's session. But we also get to do lots of really cool things around community and collaboration. So you may have seen information about our EdgeCon conferences out there. We host focus symposiums as well. We have one coming up specifically on AI teaching and learning that we're going to host in partnership at the campus of Seton Hall. And vendors are always welcome to submit to call for proposals, sponsor those events, come and engage with our members. And those are great ways to build community, build connections. We love doing that with the vendor community. We love bringing our members together so that they can learn from each other. But with that, I will get out of the way after that quick review of Edge and invite Dan to get into the meat of today's session, which is really going to focus on that procurement side.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam, and welcome everybody. Some of you are new to Edge and EdgeMarket, so it's particularly welcome to you, and those that have been around for a bit, great to have you on board for this session. Just a quick review of the agenda. What are we going to do today? Adam just gave an update and an overview around Edge. I'm going to give you an update and an overview around EdgeMarket, the cooperative pricing system. Then we're going to get into the content regarding the RFP. What is it? What is its focus? And what are some of the key new elements? And so you'll learn about business capabilities and business outcomes as two key central figures and features of this RFP. Walter will review the RFP timeline, the platforms that will be used to support the RFP, the general process, and what we aim to produce by way of resulting master agreements. And then we will have some time at the end for Q&A. But as Adam invited, as the questions arise in your mind, use the chat or the QA function to pose them, and we'll try to address them as they show up. So a little bit about the EdgeMarket cooperative pricing system. It was authorized by the state of New Jersey in 2018, building upon Edge's success as a designated lead agency within the state, which is an elevated procurement authority, allowing Edge to conduct procurements and enter into master agreements on behalf of the assigned constituencies, which of course include higher ed, but also K-12, the public sector, and all the connected healthcare types of entities that are a part of that overall community. So we have very extensive procurement authority legislatively conferred, and that elevated into the cooperative pricing system authority, which allows us to have a national footprint. And we have members, or technically they're known as participants, in our co-op from 17 states, and it's growing. We're always adding new entities from around the country. We have a portal at edgemarket.njedge.net that gives you the full story of the co-op, the legislative authorities, the kind of things that we have done by way of solution and services, master agreements, IT pro services, our massive text catalog for hardware, software, and services through SHI, our EdgeMarket bids, and then a whole plethora of things about EdgeMarket and how we work. So I would invite you to go and check that out. Our portfolio is accelerating. So, as a small team, when it started in 2018, they did some pretty big things, an ERP, SAS type of a procurement, and then there was an LMS and a handful of other things, a number of point solutions as we went. But as we got our footing, we really began to accelerate the volume of transactions, the volume of awardees, and the nature of the overall procurements as being more broad and strategically oriented. And a lot of it has been built up, and you'll see in a moment, for this moment. So we can get to an ecosystem of software solutions that are really dialed into what our higher ed constituencies need. So we have lots of software in the co-op already. We have a lot of services in the co-op already, IT Pro, enrollment management, marketing, cloud, all kinds of cloud as a service, telephony, networking as a service, and so forth. So do take a look at the portfolio in the portal. All kinds of hardware, tens of thousands of SKUs, and interestingly enough, smart athletic surfaces with IoT devices embedded in the turf of a football field or a running track or whatever surface there might be, which leads a lot of value for organizations that have such surfaces. Our mission, though, our fundamental mission as a co-op and as a consortium is to support the higher ed solution ecosystem. And there's a kind of a stack, and you can see that stack starting from infrastructure solutions as well as services. And we have already, by design, over the last couple of years, created pathways of procurement to a variety of providers that do deliver infrastructure solutions and services to our members, and that do deliver a variety of IT professional services in support of the ecosystem. And now we are focused on that ecosystem. That is the purpose of this particular RFP, and primarily academic and administrative systems. And you can see the big kind of major names of those systems in that diagram. The way we're going to go about it, though, is a little bit different than a typical RFP in the marketplace. We are going to have a focus on business capabilities. You'll learn about that. Part of this presentation is going to be educational, to expose you to the concept of business capabilities and the source of a framework that enable us to build the structure of the RFP around that. There's a lot of good work globally around notion of enterprise architecture-based planning and approach to transformation and to ecosystem technologies. There is an outstanding reference, and you'll learn more about this, the higher education reference models and its business capability model. That's what we're going to use. And you'll see very clearly in a little bit how you as bidders would be able to map your solutions and your solution portfolio to the business capabilities of higher education. And I'll lay that out nice and clearly. And then the second thing is also a new thing, focus on business outcomes. Typical in an RFP, asking for references or some testimonial quotes, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, all of these investments that the buying side of the market make are to achieve business outcomes, the historical challenge has been, how do they do that? And maybe it's in very high level terms and so forth, but there's a framework that has been developed to allow that to be very organized and categorical. And so likewise, as with the capabilities, you will see how you will be able to map the kinds of business outcomes your solutions and your support of those solutions have helped your clients to achieve. So we think it's time to elevate that part of the conversation as well. So let's talk about business capabilities. This is where I'm going to show you kind of what all that means and where we're, what resources we are utilizing to help frame this up. By the end of the day, business capabilities are the vehicles of value. Any enterprise that has customers has to compose business capabilities to deliver the value to the people who are going to pay for it. In higher ed, there's a business model, and the customer in higher ed primarily is the student. And there's a value proposition that institutions of higher ed offer to the student. You invest your time and resources with us, and after a certain period of time, we will confer upon you and within you knowledge, education, perspective, et cetera, so you could be a productive citizen of the country and economically valuable to yourself and to others, et cetera. And there's a financial model that the higher ed enterprise has to use, like any other enterprise, to make sure the revenues are all lined up and the expenses are well managed and all of that. Underlying all of that is the operating model, where there are the core resources of higher ed, the intellectual property and know-how, the faculty, staff, the curriculum that is developed, the facilities, the grounds, the campus, all of the different resources that, and of course the financial resources that higher ed has, a governance model to help drive effective decision-making strategically and tactically, and then the value streams, how they compose all of that to make the foundation for the value proposition that flows up to the student. Now, what ties all of that together are the business capabilities, how they do what they do to make this all work. And you'll see it makes all the sense in the world when we talk about it. So business capabilities, what are they? Well, in general terms, it's a combination of people, process, information, and technology, specifically organized with the intention to produce a business result, to produce, in our parlance, a business outcome. That's what we do. We compose capabilities to deliver something. Now, what might that delivery be? Well, an example of business capabilities in higher ed, under the major heading of curriculum management, there's 7 bullets there. Curriculum planning is a business capability. Higher ed is really good at planning curriculum. And then the design of the curriculum, the production, and all of the things that surround curriculum, those are all business capabilities for which they need knowledgeable, trained people with know-how, effective processes that they could repeat and do efficiently and effectively, all of the information that's necessary for all of those things to happen, and then some elements of enabling technology. That's what a business capability is. The second category would be the stuff everybody does. So curriculum management is kind of an education thing. Marketing management is kind of everybody's thing. So there's a lot about higher ed that is common to any kind of enterprise. So all of the things you do relative to marketing, those are all business capabilities. And in your world, you deliver solutions that support certain business capabilities. That is your overall value proposition to the marketplace. So let's take a look at that specific thing. Your solutions are designed to support the business capabilities to enable them to support your clients to achieve their business outcomes. Those are the 3 big building blocks of value in the marketplace. And so our role here in this RFP is to really expose that, to help you convey to this marketplace through the common language of a business capabilities model, the whole scope of your solution as it relates to the business capabilities that they are dealing with all the time. And also then to provide the evidence or your aspirational views about the kind of business outcomes, the measurable results that your solution has helped your client base to achieve, or that you intend that solution to achieve. And so we'll talk about how that happens. But that's the essence of this RFP. So let's give you a little bit of background about how we even got to this frame of thinking. I can tell you what we didn't want. And both Walter and I have been involved in literally hundreds. I know I've done multiple hundreds of enterprise software class procurement support in higher ed and in state and local government. And for decades, it was all about very detailed feature function checklists. And every buying organization had their own kind of spin on that ball. But every time the vendors had to deal with yet another feature function checklist. And it consumed lots of time and energy. They have great people who know a lot about what the customer need is, because many of them were formerly out of that particular market and worked with those kinds of organizations. I mean, many of the people that work at solution providers in higher ed were former registrars or directors of financial aid, or really, really smart students who thought there ought to be a better way. And what ends up happening is these feature function checklists just wear them down. It's a hard thing to have an elevated conversation. And secondly, detailed requirements typically are designed to support how a singular organization envisions its future state processes. We're a consortium. We're a leader of a consortium. And so we end up having in every procurement the Rutgers versus PTS dilemma. That's Princeton Theological Seminary. So Rutgers is massive, right? Princeton Theological Seminary has 200 to 300 students. Totally different worlds, but they both need to register students and do those kinds of things. So how do you develop a feature function checklist that works for both of them? You don't. We need to elevate the conversation. And that's what we are doing here. Elevating the construct of the RFP to live at the business capabilities level or layer, but also elevate the conversation to talk about the outcomes that people are able to achieve. And in order to do that, we needed to do or find or build frameworks to provide structure, a dependable, reliable, repeatable structure to make these conversations uniform and measurable and accelerated in that process. And they also these frameworks need to offer value to all of the parties, to the buying organizations, to the solution providers, to the consortium leaders like ourselves, well beyond any RFP. There should be a durability of value over the life cycle of these things and how enterprises make their planning. So we found two, the higher education reference models, as I mentioned, and something called the business outcomes framework. And I'll talk about both of those. We'll start with the higher education reference models. About 12 to 13 years ago or thereabouts, a group of institutions in Australia and New Zealand, there's an organization called CAUDIT, which really centers around that geographic region and consists of folks that really focus on enterprise architecture. If you think back, if you're around then, the SaaS model of software delivery was really starting to hit stride, and it was a different economic model. It was easy to consume, and lots of buying of SaaS solutions is happening out in the distributed departments of organizations, which created quite a bit of a challenge, a lot of spaghetti of technology for these organizations to try to manage the security issue, the integration issue, and so on and so forth. And so they were able to put together a team of folks, and they had a great consultant helping them to say, we need to rationalize this process because it's going to just continue to become very frayed and therefore fraught with risk and failure, et cetera. We need to have a different model for how we think about this stuff as an enterprise. And so they developed a set of elements in this overall reference model to help facilitate that conversation. Our focus and the focus of this RFP is going to be to leverage their business capability model. Now, we have had conversations with this group, CAUDIT, earlier this year. They're excited about our adoption of their model. There's about 1,000 institutions around the world that are using this model and their own variations of it. EDUCAUSE here in the States and several others did a global announcement in 2021. We're going to rely upon some of those materials for this session to talk about it, and they've all adopted it as the standard. Now, here's what it looks like on a placemat. They have taken the enterprise of higher ed and decomposed all of the different business capabilities into this business capability model. So they have a common language around which to speak about financial aid management or career advice or curriculum planning. There's meaning behind each of these cells. So no matter who you are in the service of higher ed or as a higher ed institution, if you put this on the board in front of everybody, we now can have a conversation. We all know what we're talking about. It's not our own terminology we're trying to translate to their terminology. It's a common thing. And so we're going to focus on learning and teaching, which are the core capabilities and what they would call the value chain of higher ed, as well as research. So that's kind of higher ed distinctive, as well as enabling capabilities, which should be the kind of things, yeah, higher ed needs to have, but are generally the type of things virtually any organization with customers and employees, which is pretty much everybody, also has to have in some form or another. So we'll dial into capabilities, core capabilities and value chain. So just zoomed in on that upper half of that section, you can kind of scan through it, and many of you are going to start nodding your heads going, yeah, that's what we do. We support the enrollment function, or we support the learning management, delivery of curriculum, type of a thing, or maybe you're involved in supporting some of the research functions. That's how you're going to approach this RFP, which you'll see shortly. Similarly, on the enabling capabilities, if you look across the top or dial into the chart itself, financial management, human resource management, advancement management, library administration, IT management, et cetera. So those are the kind of things that this comprehensive model has enabled all of us to do to get a grip on how higher ed operates and have a conversation with them about this operational model through the lens of capability. If you're to roll all that up into a nice textual form, it's pretty cool. You can see this is a lay of the land, the overall universe of higher ed here, and it's something that struck me when I first started to engage in this. I went to school back in the day before there was online registration or register over your phone. You had to get in line at in a gymnasium when they had a course catalog and you went to get your sections filled out. It looked a lot like that, which prompted the question of us, and we did a presentation to our board of trustees as we were getting closer to this. What if EDGE members, our institutions, could organize, catalog, and manage their business capabilities just like they do their curriculum? What's working, what isn't working, what needs investment, what's doing great right now, what's going to change in the future, what do we need to be prepared for, all that sort of stuff. And it's a persistent method of management and planning. And in fact, the folks that developed the HERM had already, of course, anticipated all of this. Their notion is that the higher education reference models foster the whole of institution understanding and thinking. It's the map of their world. So folks on the academic side and the administrative side and facilities can have a common conversation about what's important to the institution and how are we doing and where are we going in the future and so forth. And it allows for lots of different kinds of conversation that can happen to guide tactical and strategic planning. But at the end of the day, it allows them to more effectively invest in the capabilities that deliver the most important business outcomes and make those decisions, but also be able to dive into the details underneath those. The three visual examples are real life examples from the University of Auckland. They drive this whole side of their business planning through the lens of the HERM. And it's just very, very powerful and extremely effective. So some use case examples, just to give you a visual mentally about how this goes. One of the best parts of the presentation, this global announcement of the adoption of the HERM in the higher ed community globally, was with John Martin Lowendell from Gartner. He just gave a really nice simplified understanding of how the capability models can work for an organization. So I'll just cycle through a handful of examples so you have a mental image. One of those might be if you're thinking about capabilities, not technology, but capabilities. What are the things that are undergoing accelerated major change? What are the capabilities, so therefore the business areas that are really kind of new? Maybe the organization is really stepping into becoming an R3, Research 3 level institution, or going from R3 to R2, or maybe even to R1. So there's some new stuff going on. What if they're doing a lot more for alumni relations, et cetera. So we can use heat map concepts to illuminate what's hot, what's moving, and where's the change coming from, and then also do the same thing to say, all right, well, change is happening, but how quickly are we going to be moving in certain things? So what's the pace of change look like? So we kind of know what's going to be coming up and can agree upon that, maybe use this to facilitate conversation. Given all of that and market dynamics, things that surprise us like COVID or things that we know are coming, different things that we want to invest in like the nascent AI element, how are we going to organize our resources and what strategic choices are we going to make? Again, using the business process or the business capability model, they can turn that heat map on and say, these are the things we're moving most of our resources in, because these are the things we have to be really well enabled to deliver. And then finally, or not finally, but toward the end here, all right, well, if that's where we're going, looking today and thinking about tomorrow, how is our IT organization composed to support that? Where do we need to lean into to develop greater capability and know-how, et cetera, or partner with? Do we need to bring someone in to help us with some of this stuff? And then what about the applications? Now we're down at the technology level. You know, what's aging out? What's coming up? Where are we moving? What's going on in the marketplace? Again, through the framework of our business capabilities, because that's really the linchpin to everything, like I talked about earlier. So with that in play, the HERM has so many uses as an enterprise planning management and planning and management resource, as a connector due to common language and construct of members and solution providers, and the clear potential for a variety of consortium-wide resources. We've embraced the HERM flat out. Edge is embracing and is endorsing the HERM. We've already published articles on it in our periodicals, where we're going to have a lot more by way of informational sessions and other things that we're going to do to help them adopt an enterprise architecture planning mindset, using the HERM as a framework through which to do that. And so it is also then, as I've been saying all along, it's the foundation for the solution scope of this RFP. So the RFP, from a functional perspective, because that's how we tend to want to think, is going to provide access for you to respond to any of the capabilities in the core capability and value chain elevation of the capability model. So learning and teaching, that's all the student information system stuff. It's all the LMS stuff. It's a bit of some of the CRM, student support, relationship kind of things. And certainly in the area of research, all of the things that support the research function. We are also going to be doing a selective portioning of the enabling capabilities, the things that are bounded in a green dot dash border that you could see: business capability management, library administration, advancement management, et cetera, will be a part of what we call ecosystem RFP number 1. Ecosystem RFP number 2, we are planning as the supporting services type of a procurement. And then number 3 would be the cyber solutions, cybersecurity solutions. 2 and 3 might change in terms of chronological order, but this is how we're apportioning and organizing our procurements going forward. So what will they look like? Well, first of all, the capability scope options for you. So we're going to list all of those capabilities that are going to be a part of the scope of the RFP. And for each, you'll have a definition, the details underneath each one of these things. And within that, here's where you provide and compose your response. There'll be a handful of fields that we will ask you to complete. This will be an online mechanism. Walter will talk about that in a little bit. We want to know, is this something you provide? Do you support curriculum delivery and specifically learning and teaching resource management, that sort of thing? But for each one of those specific capabilities, in addition to your articulation or declaration of support, we're going to give you an opportunity, and we'll guide you with some bullet points to create an attachment that you could then use as a uniform template to provide your statement of support, or your capability statement for each one of the capabilities in the capability model that your portfolio addresses, that you are choosing to incorporate in your response to this particular RFP. And so that is going to be the construct of the, in fact, I'll just camp there for a second, of the sort of the functional side, more capability. orientation of the RFP. Adam, any questions at the moment regarding that portion?
Nothing yet, but we are keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So please, if you have anything that pops up, feel free to drop it in as you think of it.
Perfect. Thanks. So business outcomes, that's the second of the major new elements of the RFP. Those of you that have been around enough, you know that historically the focus of solution investment conversations has tended toward, all right, what are the things that you support? How do you support them, and how much is it going to cost? So is that a layer down from capabilities? And I wasn't really thinking about what are we trying to achieve as an organization. A little bit of that does happen. Like I said, I've done a lot of procurements or some of that conversation, but when you have an RFP construct, it tends to be about specifications and more of the detail as opposed to the elevated conversation about where you headed, sort of a thing. So focusing on business outcomes enables the buying organizations to determine and declare the business value that they are seeking to achieve. Here's where we're going and why. We'd love to know how you could help us get there, solution providers. And the solution providers, likewise, are able to show how their solutions support the achievement of business value. Outcomes like these that we've been able to support, or more importantly, our clients have been able to realize through the effective use of our solution. And we know how to drive and guide and counsel the most effective use of our solution. That's where the conversation wants to be, and that's what we're trying to instill and initiate here. So give you a specific example of how outcomes elevate the conversation. Very typically in some of a myriad type of forms, we see requirements in the RFP, like such as we need, or do you provide, or we must have APIs to the registration modules of the most common student information systems. Well, that's an interesting requirement. We can tell you what we do, right? And they can evaluate you on what you tell them what you do. But why? That's the question. It's like, oh, interesting requirement. Well, what are you trying to do? Well, we're trying to deliver because of how we are composed, a multi-institution degree program. Everybody's got their own student system and generate X number of $1 million of new revenue within a 2-year period of time. Oh, now I know where you're headed. As a solution provider, I can have an entirely different conversation with you. Yeah, we could check the box of our composition of what our capabilities are, but translate the capability to the outcome that's intended to be produced is an entirely different conversation. And such rich brain power sits within the solution provider organization, but it never really gets tapped because it can't often in the procurement process. So other examples, automate financial reporting to external stakeholders. Why? Because we're getting crushed on external audit requests. We need to get that resolved. Great. Let's talk about strategies for reducing the exposure or the challenge. And yeah, we can certainly automate reporting and so forth. But if we know what you're trying to do, then we could really dial it in for you, and so on and so forth. And the realization here is that features by themselves, that left-hand column, are really the components that enable business capability. So let's level up right from the beginning to the capabilities, but it's the capabilities of the institution that produce the intended business outcomes. That's how this works. Features and functions, or the core concepts of the solution, enable capabilities which support the attainment of business outcomes. That's the hierarchy. So the business outcomes framework takes and creates a hierarchy for thinking about business outcomes in an organized way, starting with 6 major business value categories: successful strategy, satisfied customers, optimal capacity, revenue growth, cost optimized, and financial stability. Each one of those has a set of business drivers that are discrete and defined, kind of a family of things that are related to support satisfying customers. Those things underneath each driver we would call investment areas, the things you can lean into, put resource or support or something into that because you want to improve the outcomes of the business drivers to support the value categories that they are lined up underneath. And so you define outcomes, like I gave you those 3 examples a moment ago. Every outcome is going to touch value vectors. And a value vector is sort of that generic attribute that's desirable, like we need to accelerate speed to value. We need to increase the satisfaction of our partners, our customers, our students, our employees, whatever. We need to increase quality or agility or our reputation. Well, those are value vectors that business outcomes will impact, but the business outcomes also map to those investment areas, because that's how you get to the outcome, which connect to business drivers, which roll up to business value categories. And you can imagine the ability to have a conversation with a board of directors or trustees, really, where they have a long-term vision. This is a way to map the results of the intended results of any investment, any initiative, to the support of that long-term vision, and get out from under the board saying, well, can you get another year or two out of the ERP system? Because we're not getting it. We're not seeing how this thing maps, so we're trying not to spend the money. Show them how it maps, and they'll ask you, how quickly can we write the check? That's the whole idea behind this. And as with the HERM, there's so many ways to use an outcomes framework now that you can organize that concept and the thinking and the actions, within and underneath it, that Edge is exploring other uses, but we're starting with the outcomes framework as a foundation for the business outcomes section of this higher ed ecosystem RFP. So what will that look like? I showed you kind of what it's going to look like for the capability section of the RFP. Real similar construct. You'll be presented with the overall framework in the RFP, and what will be, each one will have a definition. So there's a hierarchy and there's definition, et cetera. You'll be able to go, oh, I know what you're talking about here. And for each one, you can do the research that you need to do with your customer base. You may already have these stories embedded in case studies or narratives or anecdotes, et cetera. We're simply going to ask you to organize that and to surface that information and to place it in your RFP response, so we can have access to that and help look at you through the lens of the outcomes that your customers have been able to experience. And just like with the capabilities, we'll give you the option of also formulating, we'll give you some guidance, a kind of an outcome statement for that particular business outcome investment area, et cetera. So you'll be able to have a structured, reusable set of resources that you could use beyond this RFP, because we're going to help you organize that kind of thinking and that rich material that really hasn't been asked for in any kind of organized way prior to this. So beyond the RFP, where are we headed with kind of what are we going to do with all this rich information that the RFP is going to be seeking? And the axiom in the real world is nobody ever reads the RFP or the RFP response unless they're getting ready for a fist fight. There's some kind of dispute between the buyer and the provider, and now we're reading the RFP and the response because we're ready to take some legal action or have an unhappy conversation. And that's unfortunate because there's so much rich information, and how many hours of effort do you put into these responses just to get to the demo, right? We want to enrich all of this. So what we are going to do is all of the materials that you provide, and we could talk about what needs to have redaction, et cetera, but we're going to create a protected resource for our members. Those who are part of our co-op will have access to, password protected, so it's not open to the public, resources to enable them to research the business capability coverage of the solution providers and find who's covering what portion of the capability map or capability model. You can use those terms almost interchangeably. A map is really the institution's view of the capability set. The model is the general framework. And same thing with the business outcomes. What kind of business outcomes and what kind of categories as we're getting killed in revenue have been helpful to revenue from the solution providers under this procurement and in the award set. So we'll provide that. We'll also give you guys the option of, because we know things change. You're always investing, you're always experiencing, you're always discovering more stuff. Once you start having, for example, an outcomes conversation, you're going to surface more and more of that. We're going to give you an option to have a way of continued access to an environment to sustain, to update, to curate this material so that it is fresh. It's always fresh and new and available to our members. And Walter will touch base on this, position for the annual refresh that we're going to do with this RFP. So it's not going to be an RFP once and then 5 or 7 years later, there's another RFP event and you're beholden to what you did 5 years ago, we're going to give you all an ability to update that on a regular basis. So I'll stop there. Walter's next. Any questions about anything I've talked about, including the outcomes, capabilities, or the general intent of the RFP?
Nothing in yet, but we will definitely have time at the end. So please drop those in, or we can also. Oh, here we have one in. What will the annual refresh entail?
Let Walter address that. Maybe Walter and I tag team on the next slide. Great question.
Cool.
Yep. Anything else?
That's it for now, but keep them coming. Walter, all yours.
All right, Walter.
Okay, for those who don't know me, I'm Walter Lewis. I'm the EdgeMarket procurement agent. So when I'll be managing the procurement from start right up to the award. So I will be the main contact dealing with you if you plan to bid. So we plan to release the RFP in June 18th. That's the plan. The close date is going to be September 24th. And the reason we are extending the usual period that we have for procurements is because this is something new. It's new to you. It's new to us. There's going to be a lot of learning on both sides. So we want to give you an opportunity so you can marshal your resources to be able to do a fantastic job. So the question period is going to be up to August 16th. The platform we use for all our procurements is BidNet Direct. So bidnetdirect.com. If you aren't a member of BidNet Direct and you plan to respond to this RFP, then I would suggest that you start looking at joining BidNet Direct because they have some requirements that you need to respond to. The detailed responses are going to be done using Decision Director. So in our documentation on BidNet that you would download, you would have instructions of how you would access Decision Director. We do expect a high volume of respondents, so we expect that this period is going to take a while for us to get through the whole process. The evaluation process will include orals or demonstration or both, and we anticipate multiple awards based on satisfactory ratings. Now, Dan talked about this annual refresh. Normally, our master agreements are usually 5 years with a review at year 3 and then year 4, and then there's the last year. We are moving to 7-year agreements now with an annual refresh. And that annual refresh will allow you to update what you have done in the past year so that Edge members have access to the new things that you've put in your solutions. And we reckon that's a fair way of you exposing the updates that you've done to your solutions. And our members can have, right up-to-date information when they're looking for solutions for their particular issues. I think that is it. And there's another question. So I think I covered the question with the annual refresh.
Yeah, let us know, Nate, if that checked the box for you on the annual refresh question. We have another question in. Once we register via BidNet Direct, will that commute to Decision Director, or do we need to register in both in order to see and manage responses?
Dan?
So when you, as Walter indicated, there'll be instructions for accessing Decision Director. It's a very simple sending a note to a support address, and then you'll get onboarded. Very, very easy process. No cost or anything like that for Decision Director. Many have used it already that I think are on this call, but for those of you new, it's a pretty simple onboard.
Okay, great. We have a few minutes left here. Definitely able to answer a couple more questions if there are any. While we wait for a few more to come in, just a reminder to everyone, we will be sending this recording out so that you can go back and review it, as well as a PDF of the slide deck, as well as, I think, Dan, some links to the HERM resources and business outcomes resources as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So you'll get a nice little package and follow up here, and of course, we'll make Dan's contact information, Walter's contact information available so that you can reach out with any other questions that might arise. We do have a few minutes left here, so we'll be happy to hang out and wait for any questions that you might have before we break. Any extra color, anything additional, Dan, to add on what we covered today?
One of the things that we'll offer, well, I think you might have done that, is schedule time with me in particular in advance of the RFP. Once the RFP is released, it'll be all about Walter and the formal RFP type of process. But definitely encourage you to take a look at, kind of, now that you know what's going to be in the procurement, to educate yourselves in those things, and take the opportunity. We do see the shift. I will say this: we see lots of bid oral presentations, tons of them. We're also participants in the marketplace as you are, and so we definitely see the trend line increasing about the business outcomes concept. People are more talking about that. Every conversation that we've had with solution providers, as well as with the buying organizations on that side of the market, really like the idea of elevating the business capabilities. We hope that you see, greater value beyond even this RFP to have an enterprise conversation at that level. We're really trying to move the market away from, handcuffing itself with list of new versions of detailed requirements in these procurements. So looking to be an easy button for everybody. I will also say this. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to share the story of the conversation we were having with a CFO in our network yesterday.
Go ahead and do that, and then I can finish up with what I was doing.
Yeah, I think that's, just to kind of add some color to how the community is viewing this. We're talking with a CIO whose organization is actually in the midst of evaluations for a new ERP system, and his comment was, geez, I wish you guys would have had something like this available 6 months ago when we started our journey, because it would have made it a lot easier to kind of see the outlines and make some plans around it. But I think that the outcome being, those kinds of folks who are making these strategic decisions are going to be tracking this really closely. They're going to look for the vendor community to support it, and I think they see the value in the outcome of an ecosystem that can really streamline what they're trying to do from an operations perspective, from a strategic perspective, and knit that together through the procurement side of things. So definitely interest from the buying side of things.
And the other thing that I wanted to point out is, take a step back and think about what's happening here. We're creating a pathway of procurement that sets the tone. We will already have achieved the RFP obligation for every single one of our members that otherwise would have to go through their own RFP. But back to that Rutgers to Princeton Theological Seminary dilemma, unrealistic to expect that anybody who is fresh in the marketplace and open to all options, they're not just going to pick one and say, well, I'll take them, right? There needs to be this deeper conversation that you are going to want to have with them to make sure they're the right kind of client for you, and they would have with you to make sure that you've got the right composition of everything that they're going to need. So there will be engagement, but it's not going to have the shackles of we're in a procurement, so therefore you can only talk to certain people, or there's a structure and a time limit for certain kind of conversations. So we're giving more elbow room and freedom to have meaningful conversations because we already did the official act. And we've got a great variety, and there'll be more firms that are really good at helping institutions guide themselves to the right kind of clarity as to what they specifically need, kind of the system selection piece minus the RFP. We already have them in the EdgeMarket portfolio, so they can more easy to get them to be able to get the engagement with a member, because the member just says, yeah, I like XYZ company, have you guys help me, and then they could guide a very positive, effective conversation with each of you, but you're all able to then focus on the capability model and the value proposition, and then decisions can then be made. So really trying to make this a better process at the end of the day for everybody.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to end on then. We haven't had any additional questions come in. So, definitely keep an eye out for the follow-up information. As I mentioned, we'll be sending. And please do let us know if you have any further questions, or if anybody else on your team wants to take a deep dive with us in preparation for the RFP. Thanks so much for the time today, everybody. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Walter.
Thank you all.
Thank you.